Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm a lead management consultant at Foreman & Associates, LLC, where we provide consulting and professional development services. And Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit foremanllc.com. That's FOREMANLLC.com. Hey everyone. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. Episode 72. Got some big things we're going to talk about. Let me start off with a quote from Barbara Corcoran. Shark Tank Shark. She says, when you're building a business, you're either all in or you're not. So we're going to talk about some things business that I think is really important. It comes from a listener, a follower of this podcast. The question came through, well, what if I don't have any competition? What if our company doesn't have any competition? And I was like, oh, now that's a good topic. Because there are some red flags, and we're going to look at some of them today. Yeah, let's look at some of those today. There's one that comes to mind that there's two that comes to mind immediately, but one that definitely comes to mind. The thing is that if you don't have competition, you need to be asking yourself why we don't have competition. That is what investors are going to be wondering. That's what anyone's going to be wondering. Why is it that you don't have competition? Because competition's validation for your product or your service. It basically says that, hey, there is a demand for this and we're supplying it. And there's so much of a demand that it was requiring more folks to get into this arena to fulfill the with enough supply. You see what I mean? So, I want you guys to imagine any sporting event without competition. Imagine playing basketball and only your team is on the court. You guys you're playing no one. Imagine a swim meet and you're the only swimmer in the pool. Imagine playing tennis by yourself. Like, there's no one else on the other side of the court. I just keep going on and on, right? I just keep going on and on. It's kind of scary to think about. It really is, though. That is what it's like. At some point, it just becomes drab, boring, and you walk away. There's only so long that you can just, keep swimming laps by yourself. Who's pushing you? How are you getting better, stronger? How are you able to measure your growth and your development if you're only going up against yourself? And, okay, you could be going up against a better time, but compared to what time? Does that make sense? That's the same in business. So let's look at some reasons why you wouldn't have any competition. The first thing that comes to mind is a monopoly. Even though we have some big whopper of corporations out there that are making a lot of business moves. Oh, goodness. Some of these companies, I'm like, you do know they are a monopoly. They are a monopoly. And they have learned a lot from the economics-themed board game called Monopoly. But I don't think they really understood that the game was never made to create individuals or to encourage individuals to take on that mindset. Did you guys know that Monopoly was actually created by a woman named Lizzie Magie in 1903? She was actually trying to show that an economy that rewards individuals is better than one where monopolies hold all the wealth. She was speaking against monopolies. She was speaking against, toxic capitalism. But somehow, we have taken this approach that we have to gobble up everything and all reign the king who has it all. It is against the law in the US, and we do know there are some companies that are on that slippery slope of, people are saying, hey, we're going to have to bust you up. This conglomerate that you have developed is you're going to flatten the market. You're literally going to be the only person in the pool. And with that, I'm going to dabble on monopolies, in other episodes, but at some point, if you are the end all be all, your quality is going to start to wane. It will. You're going to hit that point of mediocrity. It happens. Now, if you've been surfing the M&A wave and you've been gobbling up tons of businesses, you're probably in that box. But for the majority of us, we're not monopoly. So the second reason is that you could be ahead of the market. And this is something that has happened. It does happen. It will always happen, that you can offer a product or service that's new, is an innovative approach. No one else is really doing it. Because if you think about it, there's always a first in every market until you're not the only one. But if you're the only one for years and years and years and years, then there's something that may not be meshing well. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But let's just look from an innovative approach. As an innovator, you're carving out a new segment in a market, and you have to convince prospective customers why your way is better and why your way will solve their problems better and faster, right? With an understanding that people reject change. We fear change. We are like, we cringe at the thought of change. And it's true, because look at all the times that people do these New Year's resolutions and then they fall flat like by March. But how many people that are always on this yo-yo diet, or always trying this new fad, we don't really do well with change. We change because we have to, not because we really want to. And so they have to be prepared for the change you're trying to sell, which means you have to help prepare them. The more you educate the market on your solution, then the more apt they will be on accepting your solution. But you have to understand that the more you educate the market, the more the other creators will want to cash in. The more they'll say, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Why didn't we think of that first? Let's jump in on this. We can also be able to offer this. There's plenty of people out there that need it. And hence you now create competition. Years ago, my dad had a tech solution for the real estate market, but he was about 10 to 15 years ahead of the market. And real estate brokers and agencies, they couldn't conceive of the idea. They said no one would want it, no one would use it, no one would buy it, and da 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 da. And I know you're wondering, like, well, what was this idea that your dad had for the real estate market? Virtual viewing of properties. Yep. The same technology we use today, that we are so carefree in using today, to view the interior and exteriors of a house, of a property, from our computer or our laptop or other devices. My dad was pitching that idea in the early 90s. He had the technology to do it. He was going from agency to agency, and he was going through the marketplace. But he was ahead of the market. And that's not the first time that my dad was way ahead of a market that he was in. He had a vision, and he would, and he would have the technology, he'd have the solution. But if the market isn't ready for you, if they fear that change, if they can't conceive it, if their mind does not have the capacity to think futuristically like you can box yourself out. And in that position, you have to choose to then invest heavily in educating the market on your solution. And the thing is that do you have the money and the time and the energy to make that investment? And even if you do, are you prepared for someone with deeper pockets to catch a whiff of what you're doing and enter the ring to compete? And the thing is, you have to be willing and understand that it can happen. You just like, there's no different than, think about all of the different product lines that Facebook and Amazon and others have gobbled up, because there was a product that they didn't offer, but they knew it would be complementary to them now or in the future. So I have bigger pockets. I'll come in, and maybe I'll come in and gobble you up. Maybe I'll come in and compete with you. And then when I realize I can't compete with you, I'll gobble you up. Right? So, now Instagram, WhatsApp are owned by who? Facebook, which now Meta, right? So that is something that you have to be mindful of, is that you could be ahead of the market. You're going to have to invest heavily in educating the market in order for them to fully embrace your solution, so that you're not waiting, or worse, just giving up on your dream because the market's not ready for you. And the third reason you could not have competition is that your definition is too narrow. And you could be sitting back, and there's a lot of people, this is what I hear most of the time. They're like, well, there's no other company that does what we do. There's no one that does exactly what we do. And you're right, that could be the case, that no one else does what you do. However, that does not mean that there's not another company that doesn't do similar things, that don't come close, that can't be a substitute for your company. Twix, right, is a substitute for M&Ms. It's not the same, but it's a substitute. See? And you can say, oh, well, they're both candy. Yeah, but imagine if you're like, but we're Twix. Imagine if we only had Doritos and no other tortilla chip company ever came in to the marketplace. Or before there was Doritos, right? Before Frito-Lay busted out with Doritos, what chips were already on the market? And what if they turned around, they're like, oh, we're the only ones that make these tortilla chips. And then all of a sudden, here comes Doritos. And so then Doritos like, we're not going to just have nacho cheese. We're going to have Cool Ranch. We're going to have this. We're going to have that, right? It's the same thing as that sometimes you're thinking too narrowly because you're looking at the perfect puzzle piece, and that there's no other piece that looks just like our piece. Okay, that's fine. But are there other pieces that can make it work, that can fit? And the answer is possibly. And if not, it's going to tee up for what I'm going to say next, which a lot of people don't want to hear. And the reality is, well, let me finish this first. Before I knock the wind out of some sails. But, so looking at that, what companies are similar? What companies could be substitutes? And then also understanding something that, even customers may not necessarily understand this, but you may be offering one solution, but your prospective clients, your customers, are looking for broad solutions because they have many needs. And so an example of that would be, I have a client who came to me and was like, hey, Natasha, we're having issues with X, Y, Z, or we need X, Y, and Z. And so as I am then, listening and observing, and I'm like, okay, it reminds me of, you have a sore throat. Like, I have a sore throat right now. And let's say I go to the doctor and I'm complaining about this sore throat. There may be other things that are also irritating me, but not to the extent of my sore throat. So this is the only thing I'm coming in to complain about. It is only when the doctor starts to probe, starts to ask questions, starts to poke around, and all of a sudden I start then, oh yeah, and I've got, this, that going on. But the intensity of what I was most focused on was the sore throat. Well, that's the same in business, right? That's the same with when you're looking at your customers' needs. my customer is talking about the sore throat, but then all of a sudden, the more I start asking questions and I start probing, I find out they've got this, they've got that, and they even have a inflamed big toe, right? Okay, well, there's an infection, and that infection is actually what it manifests as that, as this, but this is, you see what I'm trying to say? So that's what happens in business. And so when you are looking at your solution, you could be addressing, your solution could be the spray or the cough drop for the throat. However, you then find that there's another product out there that will deal with the cough, but it'll also deal with, addressing, the inflammants, something that's possibly causing the cough, or that they're addressing something that could be an allergy, right? So they added something in there that addressed that. So it's like, oh, well, if I'm looking at these two products on the shelf, I'm like, well, yeah, I've got a cough. But you know what? It could also be something that's triggering because of, allergies or sinus or whatever. And here, this one over here addresses those as well. I'll just go ahead and, knock out all three versus, I'm struggling with one and I still have issues with the other two. So I'll grab that. And so for my client, when, he was telling me what he and his team I ended up finding a solution that addressed not only the initial thing, the things that the pain point that was most prevalent, but I also was able to address other issues that were not painful at that point, but that would surface once we started applying the ointment to the throat. All of a sudden you'll find out about the big swollen toe. And what happens is you don't want to address the big swollen toe a week or two later, or when all of a sudden it does become excruciating. At that point, heck, it may be more than the toe you're dealing with. You're dealing with the whole leg. But sadly, this is what we experience in business, is that people don't come. What did I say about change, right? It's no different than people don't rush to the doctor once you have a cough. You wait until it becomes unbearable. You wait until it triggers something else, until you have multi-symptoms and you can't tend to it on your own. Your product, if it is not offering broad solutions, you may only be getting a slither of the market, which it seems as though you're the only competition because you're narrowly focused on your market and on the competition. There's another example. You may be selling an app and you're like, well, our app does this and there's no other app that does that. Okay, so you then think that, well, we're not competing against other apps. Well, you're not competing against other apps with the same specific focus. But there are other apps out there that could be offering similar things. Or look at this approach. There are other sources out there that can be substituted for your app. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm a techie. I have all these different devices. I've got plenty of apps. Matter of fact, my iPhone has already notified me yesterday. Girlfriend, you are maxed out on the capacity of this phone. You are like one day away from not being able to do nada. And I'm like, well, what is taking up all of my storage? And what is it? It's my apps. I'm app heavy. So as of yesterday, I'm up here like, okay, well, which apps are priority? Which ones I really use? Which ones do I just have because, I needed it for a particular meeting and I don't even use those anymore. Let me delete. I'm still app heavy. And I'm like, well, what in the world am I going to do? But even with me being app heavy, I'll never, ever, 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 ever give up using notebooks and journals and pens and pencils. I still use paper planners. I use my apps as my backups to that. I use paper journals. I tried to do the whole digital journal, like I'm going to journal and using an app. That didn't work. I probably have like 1 or 2 entries, and then I was probably trying to find a way to print them out and tape them inside of a paper journal. I like the tactile exchange, the energy that is exchanged between the hand and the instrument and the writing surface. That's just me. And so I use my apps to back up, to reinforce, to be the alerts, so I can have an auditory experience of something saying, "Hey, lady, don't forget." That's what my apps are for, is to give me that alert of don't forget. Go back to your to-do list. Stay focused, lady. You're losing focus, girl. That's what my apps are for. Those are not my primary drivers. And so when you're considering your target market, if you have this app, you could not put me in that one box. You can't say, oh, here we go. Here's the demographics. We have this woman in 40s and she is our target market. No. I mean, I already cringe at boxes. You guys know that, but you get the gist of that. You have to understand, you could put me into multiple boxes, because you're going to have to expand your view of me. You're going to have to say, wait a minute, our competition is not just another app that could potentially offer the exact same features that we're offering, but our competition's also these planners and calendars and journals that she uses, because we are literally the complement to her primary. We are not her primary. We aren't her primary. So she may buy our app or download our app, whatever, because it may be a free app. She may pay for some of the premium features of our app, but we are the complementary to her primary. So maybe as we're thinking about our app, we have to consider that there are other users out there just like that. Is there a way for us to create some type of bonus features that can allow the primary use to then be complemented by our app in a way that makes people want to come to us more? Meaning, not that we would substitute for the primary, because I already told you, you're not going to be able to substitute for my paper calendar, my paper organizer. You're not going to be able to substitute for that. You're not. It's not happening. You're not substituting for my journal. Not happening. So what could you do to enhance the experience for me? Is you could create a feature where I could scan somehow, or that information that I put in writing could then also be put in your app, and also have a feed through to other apps. So maybe as this app is being able to extract information to create this reminder or to be part of whatever entry, it can also, feed through to my iPhone calendar. Does that make sense? So that is something that you can do as a value added proposition that you can create. But that's going to require you to understand and to expand your view of what a competitor is and where they are, and expand your view of your target market. When you're able to do that, you can then refine your messaging and why you're the better solution. That's how you pitch as to why you're the better solution. You're not saying we are the only of. You're saying here are some other options. Let us show you how we can enhance those options. Let's show you our other competitors and why we think that we're a better solution than them. Booyah. Then you can get me, right? So the fourth reason that you could, and it's really, I would probably say like the fourth and final. I could probably come with some other reasons, but here's probably the fourth reason why you don't have competition is, and I hinted to it a little bit earlier, is that you don't have what we want. You're going on and on. Your friends and family rave about your product or your service, but guess what? The rest of us don't want it. And it's something that is a difficult pill to swallow. That is like trying to swallow a whole watermelon. Like you're just shoving the entire watermelon down your throat. It's very difficult. It crushes the ego. But we have to be self-aware. We have to be humble to accept that not everyone wants what you're selling. Not everyone wants what I am selling. And it's, and it's okay. I have to understand, am I in one of these four buckets? Well, I know I'm not a monopoly. That's clear, right? So what is it? And the thing is that, could you be in the wrong area? Could you be marketing it to the wrong audience? Are you big city, but you should be marketing it to small city or small town, or vice versa? Are you marketing it to the wrong temperament and culture? Meaning, are you marketing, is your product, your service meant for, high achievers, who are very ambitious, but yet you're marketing it to people who are like, look, I don't need all that. I just need the simple things in life. Like all that extra stuff is just, I don't need that. And you're like, yeah, but you can have it. They're like, but I don't need it. I don't want it. That's not what I want. I'm chilling back. I'm satisfied with what I have. I have more than enough. But your product or your service is pushing for the people that are thinking that they don't have enough, that they keep wanting more. Then you need to reposition who you're marketing to. Why sell a solution for the rural areas in a busy metro and vice versa? Why are you pushing a product or a service that has no relevance and fit in a particular area to a particular, market? If the market you serve is teeny tiny and not large enough to build your business for longevity, you may be selling the wrong product or service or selling to the wrong market. So you have to put in some research, and you have to accept the facts and truth that come from that research. Real in-depth, real research, investigative work. If you don't know how to do it, you need to hire someone to do it for you. When you get those facts and that truth, you then need to make the pivots, however those pivots are. And understanding that the greater the demand for your product or service, the more you're expected to supply. And at some point, you're going to reach your maximum threshold. I'm at capacity. I can't do anymore. I only have 2 arms and I only have 2 employees. So that means either A, you're going to have to increase your the number of employees, and then you're like, gosh, we only have 7 days a week and we need a day off. And they're like, oh, do we expand and do 7 days? Are we now trying to open up additional locations to accommodate the demand? Right? And now you just keep building, trying to grow to meet demand. That's it. People do it. But what happens to the unfulfilled orders? What happens when you can't? Because there's a point where you just can't. Well, they go to your competition. They go, the competition. They go to your competition. That's kind of just what happens. They go to your competition. But if you don't have this demand-supply dilemma, then we don't want your stuff. We don't want what you're selling. Now you need to take that information and pivot and determine, is it what I'm selling, or is it to who I'm trying to sell it to, or where I'm trying to sell it? Now I have a quote from Dwayne Johnson. This says, the road to success and greatness is always paved with consistent hard work. Outwork your competitors, be authentic, and above all else, chase your greatness. Now you notice with that is chase your greatness. It's not chasing someone else's. Right? It's being true to who you are and all that you are, but it's about you and what you're pursuing, and it's understanding your mission and your why and the vision that you have. And so it's not saying that, we have no competitors, because you like I said, being in the pool by yourself doing laps it's great for training, but that's it. So let's look at some benefits of competition. I'm going to just outline about 7. Of course, I can rattle out more, but we don't have time for more. We're going to focus on 7. The first thing, and this is multi-layered, is that it definitely forces you out of your comfort zone. It pushes you to be better. It gives you something to work towards. Iron sharpens iron. You should want the best competitors. You should be like, yes, like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. They are great competitors. Do you not think they don't push each other to greatness? They have the longevity because of their their competition, because they push. McDonald's, Burger King, right? You got Popeyes and Chick-fil-A. They're going at it, and you got Wendy's, who loves coming in and loves poking at all of them in their own way. All right, I love Wendy's. Whoever handles their Twitter is hilarious. But do you see what I mean? It's the healthy competition. It forces you out. You can't be complacent and mediocre and just like cruising it when you have competition. It should make you better if you're doing it in a healthy way. If you're obsessed about your competition to the point where it turns kind of dark, That is not, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But number two is that you can learn from their mistakes, their weaknesses, and their strengths. I tell people all the time, if you're doing a SWOT analysis on yourself and you're looking at yourself, you're doing one on your team. So your team members have all done a SWOT, and you now have this comprehensive SWOT on you and your team, and you're looking at how that all plays into the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats of your company. Would you not look at your competition and say, what are their strengths and their weaknesses? What could potentially threaten them? What are some potential opportunities that they could seize? Maybe we can seize them, maybe we can't. But when you're looking at that, you can learn when they blunder. You're like, whoa, did you see that? Okay, well, we're going to learn from that and not do that. We're not going to do that. But when you see in ways that they're really good at something, they're really great at something, like, wow, you got to give them props. Now, it's not that, now we're going to try to do it too. That may not be your strength. Don't be trying to go down a rabbit hole that's not for you. Commend them on theirs. Look at where you're stronger, and you can then focus on that. But you can learn from their weaknesses. You can learn from their strengths. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's validation. The competitive market shows adequate demand. That is a benefit for competition. 4 is that you can create possible strategic alliances or collaborations with your competitors where you can cross promote for each other. It's possible. Because especially if you're saying we're not identical in every way, this is not a true, like, oh my goodness, this is a BMW Mercedes type of thing. No, like, we could turn around and say, yes, I could substitute for yours in so many ways and vice versa. Is there a way for us to cross promote? Because as we're in this cross promotion, we're also being able to squeeze out some of our other competitors, right? Where they don't shine as much, where then all of a sudden someone's like, oh, okay, well, I can have both. It's possible that you can. There's sometimes where, like, for instance, as a consulting firm, we're not a full service consulting firm. What I mean by that is you cannot come to us for everything you need and want. Are there other consulting firms that offer services that we don't offer, or services that we used to offer that we no longer offer? Yes. So is there a way for me to then have a strategic alliance with them? They're still my competitors because they're consulting firms. They're still my competitors if they offer professional development services. But do they offer exactly what we offer? No. How we offer it? No. So is there a way for us to have a strategic alliance where all of a sudden, if someone comes my way or comes their way, we can then be able to promote for each other and say, hey, there's this, we see that you have these issues here, or you've come to us with these issues. We don't address those issues. However, just like one doctor referring you to another doctor, they're sending you to another specialist, is the same thing that you can do when you have healthy competition, right? When you're sitting back and you're saying, I'm going to refer you over to this other consulting firm who specializes in this. They specialize in financial audits. My company does not. We do job audits. We'll do other type of management audits, but we don't do the financial audits. So I can then refer out, right? We have this alliance where it's just this type of cross promotion. Boom. So a fifth benefit is it forces you to innovate and find ways to gain an advantage and lead in the market. This ties into the first one about pushing you to be better. But we see so many companies that are in the corporate graveyard because they refuse to innovate and find ways to gain a footing, to hold their footing, to lead in some way. Not having a monopoly, but is there something where when someone mentions that product or service, they think and speak of you? That is one way in which that you can lead in the market. And it could be because your customer service. When we think about our cell phone providers, we know of certain companies that have great features, but then they may have lousy customer service, or they have amazing customer service, but you barely get a signal anywhere. But when you talk about who's got the best customer service for cell phone providers, people will blurt out their chosen brand, right? When you say who has the best, reception, and then they blurt out their brand, that is something that where you can lead in the market. This creates that type of energy that drives that. Number 6 is you can find your niche, your specialization, in the ways in which you can create a mutual benefit between you and your, customers, your clients. But also, like I said, when you're looking at that specialization in the ways in which you can create a mutual benefit with, your strategic allies. In the ways in which I become more specialized, where we're like, this is what we're focusing on, we're not going to narrow ourselves. We're not going to put ourselves in that trap where we're so narrow that, someone else that has broader solutions can come in and gobble up, the prospective, client that we would like to have a relationship with. But the fact is that we're like, okay, we're not trying to be a one-stop shop. And so if I have my specialization, I can then create a mutual benefit where my clients then understand what they're getting from me. They understand that whoever is working on my team is going to always look at all of the potential needs that they have, and they're going to address them and say what it is that Foreman and Associates provides and how we can help, and who we have as allies that we can be able to refer you to, and we can properly hand you off in the introduction, where we're not like, just check out the yellow pages or Google it. No, where we're actually handing that baton. It feels as though that other company is part of our company. That's the type of relationships that I like to be able to have, is where I'm like, I may not have certain things in-house, but do I have my relationships with other companies where when I am bringing a solution to my client is not always fully aware that they are dealing with an outside company. They think it's all in-house. That is when you have built a strong understanding and awareness, and you're confident. Even when I say, oh yeah, no, this is not in-house, this is another company, they're like, what? Yeah, this company does this. We just have a really good relationship. And so with this, I'm going to hand this part of our project to them, and everything will be communicated openly, right? So that we're all on the same page, because we want you healthy and happy and satisfied. And then at that point, when, the project comes back in this other way, or however it's done, maybe I've completed all of my part and now it's time to hand off to the other company. But it allows that where everyone is benefited from it. And then last but not least is that, which ties into the mutual benefit I just mentioned, was it increases customer satisfaction. How can you offer something that the giants, for example, don't or won't or can't? We look at in the tech realm and that we have out in the rural areas, a lot of them still are in that kind of like that dial-up speed technology. And I think we talked about that in like episode, 10 or 11 or something like that years ago, where we're looking at, well, what companies, what startups, what smaller companies can come out into those areas and offer the service that the big companies like AT&T are like, we're not thinking about them. What we're thinking about is 5G, and we're thinking about this, and we're thinking about, Internet of Things and blah, 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 blah. We're not really concerned about the rural areas. We won't be concerned about them until developers start to mass build out there, and the infrastructure is there that is then requiring us to now go meet that need. But imagine if you're already out there satisfying that need. Now, when the AT&Ts and all the giants eventually then see that the market is out there has developed in a way that they can try to come in and steamroll you, you've already been able to acquire enough that it will create a scenario where the customer base may say, well, that's fine, AT&T, and yes, we do know the resources you have, but for the past 15 years, you've chosen not to serve our needs, and this company right here has, and we would prefer to stay with them. You're cool, but you're not that cool. On the other hand, it could be that they say, wow, well, AT&T, they have a bigger budget. And so they're able to now they're able to undercut maybe, or to provide some added services that this smaller company can't. So we're going to choose AT&T, and you just kind of take that L, but you've had 10, 15 years of being able to build your reputation in the area, be able to, you know, build the revenue from that and to have that relationship, and you don't know where that'll pivot you to. But what you don't do is you don't ignore and say, oh, well, you know, AT&T has to be out there in the rural areas. Not necessarily. And I could say that for the state of Georgia. There is a lot of opportunity out there for those of you that are in that industry of tech, where you can be able to provide, you know, the high-speed internet and all these other things. They're out there, folks. You know, and I'll just leave it at that. So with that, competition can increase customer satisfaction in that you can provide better customer service, and you could actually, you know, roll in with some disruptive pricing. You can come in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, what do you see the big brands have the streaming, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. And here they have these streaming packages, but then you see these independents that are coming in, little mom and pops that are coming in. They're like, well, you could pay us $10 a month. And so then what did the giants do? The giants were like, oh, no way. You know, we want to still charge 80 something bucks and 120 something bucks for cable. And so, you know, and we're offering streaming now too. And now we're going to create these contracts with the stars and with, you know, the HBO or whatever, where we can now pigeonhole it in a way where the smaller ones that were coming in with disruptive pricing, we're going to now try to criminalize it, you know, as though what they're doing isn't what we were doing. It's just we're bigger, and so we should be able to get a pass. That's basically what it comes down to. So let's identify competitors, because a lot of times people are really misunderstand the definition of competitors and the types of competitors and how to identify them. So when we look at the types of competitors, we have direct competition, right? You're competing for the same market. You're offering similar products or services. It's kind of like crystal clear, right? The PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, direct competition. Indirect competition, you're offering different products or services, but you could satisfy the same need. So for instance, you may have the PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, but then I bust out with some Kool-Aid. Do you see what I mean? It's not soda. It's but if I satisfying the same need, yeah, I'm satisfying thirst. Woo! That's just something, you know, I can put out there. But there's other indirect competitors. I'm offering something that is different, but I'm satisfying that same need. You have to understand the needs of your target market. So when I'm identifying competitors, what are some things that you can do? So you could do market research, and we talked about that briefly a moment ago. You need to see who's selling what you are selling, who's selling stuff that's similar to what you're selling. And it's going to require some time and energy. You may not have the time or energy. You may not know how to do it. You need to find someone who does, so that you can get the research. You need the facts and the truth, so you can make the decisions you need to make. So that's number one. That's one way to identify your customers. A second way, your competitors. A second way to identify your competitors is from your customers. Find out. Like, have you ever noticed that you get these little surveys from all these different, like, the companies that you brought, and they're asking you to tell you about your purchase your purchase history, or like, you know, when was the last time you bought a VCR or whatever, right? Remember those? And then you still get them. What they're trying to find out, this is one way to identify their competitors. What brands, products, and services are you using? That's what you want to know about your customers. And you'd be surprised at the players in the market that you've overlooked. That's what those surveys are. They go out to the customers, and they're trying to find out, how many folks in the household, and they're surveying to find out, the income. And then they ask you, when was the last time you made a purchase, this type of purchase for this type of product or this type of service, or, who do you use for, carpet cleaning, or who do, what kind of, blah, blah, whatever, right? The research is to find directly from your customer base where they spend their money, where they invest their time, so that you're then able to ascertain your direct and indirect customers. But also, if you're contemplating branching into a product line, you need to see what would be more likely that your customers would buy from you or choose to buy from someone else. So that leads me to a quote from Eric Rice that says, the ability to learn faster from customers is the essential competitive advantage that startups must possess. And I know that's a slight pivot from another quote that's similar, that's about to learn faster from your competition, but for his approach is from your customers, is essential. So that leads me to my third way in being able to find out about your competition is through social media forums and platforms. I'm not talking about the posts that someone put on Instagram. I'm talking about the forums that people use when they're seeking advice. They need suggestions and they're asking questions, and people are then recommending various companies that, well, we use so-and-so for carpet cleaning, or we use so-and-so for X, Y, and Z. When you are then having someone search those forums, you're then able to find out a lot about your competition and who's out there. A fourth way is doing a keyword search to identify direct and indirect competition. A lot of people use it for indirect competition, but you can use it for direct competition, especially if you're in the mindset that you don't have direct competition. This is a great way of doing it. So you can do an SEO review of businesses that are competing for space online, and you can search the keywords that are important to your industry. So when you put in those keywords and that query pops up, then you're able to see who's out there, who's out there doing what you're doing that you didn't know is out there doing what you're doing. A fifth resource is analyzing Google search engine results. So who's writing or blogging about the topics that relate to your value proposition for your product or your service that you're pitching. These writers, right? These brands could be your competitors. These websites could be your competitors. So what you do is you type in those keywords and see which companies pop up in your query. Those can be your direct and indirect competitors. Type them in there. And a lot of times they are indirect, right? Because they could be far outside of your region, or like for instance, I have a consulting firm. My direct competition is not Bain and Company, right? They are huge. They're huge. But to say that they're not competition is a lie. Indirectly, they are, for the reasons that if someone were to then do a query, they're going to see them. They're going to see McKinsey and Company. Now, whether or not someone can afford them is another story. Whether or not they're going to get the same type of, customer service that they could get from my firm is another story. Do you see what I mean? But what's going to queue up is this. So those are the behemoths that I still acknowledge. And in what ways do I learn from them and their years of experience and all the ways that the changes that they've made and how they've evolved. But when I then want to narrow down to see who's really, I'm really, going up against for my this slither of the market share, I can then do these queries to be able to then find out and to see who pops up and say, oh, I didn't even know that this company existed. Whoa, I didn't know that this company is only, 20 minutes from here, or is an hour from here. Oh, I didn't know that this company offers these features that we don't offer, or that we do offer. I just thought we were the only ones, which is why so many of you will say we don't have competition. You haven't done the research, which leads me to the sixth option resource is Google AdWords. And Google AdWords will provide you with the paid data on the companies or websites that are purchasing ads for those keywords. So same keywords that you mentioned, that they can provide you the data. So if these websites, if these companies are paying for space on the search engine results page, utilizing whatever keyword or keywords that you searched on, those folks are your competitors. When they pop up and you see those paid ads, those are your competitors, whether direct or indirect. Now, as I mentioned earlier, don't obsess over your competition. So this isn't an exercise to fall into the comparison trap, right? We've talked about comparison trap plenty of times. This is not the comparison trap to fall into. The purpose of doing this is to identify who your competition is, what they offer in comparison to you. So you're supposed to be focusing on your customers and their needs and their wants. What value are you creating and offering them? And then you have to look at in comparison to other companies. But you're not supposed to obsess about getting the most customers. You need to give the most that you have to the ones you have. That's what you need to do. Give the most of what you have to the ones you have. You may not have a desire to have 50,000 customers. I don't. I couldn't even handle 50,000 clients. Not in my industry, not in what I do. It's not even feasible to even think that. What I do is not a scale. It's not scaled that way. That's just not that type of service and product that we offer. But even if I had a barbecue, business, restaurant where we made some slamming barbecue, it's not to say that I'm like, wow, I want this, unless I have an expansion plan in place and we're hiring like crazy. Because at some point, if the wait time for that barbecue becomes too long, in the early phases, yeah, because the demand, especially with social media, you could be like, oh my gosh, and I wait in line 4 hours. And sometimes it still is. Like, for instance, Pink's Hot Dog in California. I love Pink's, and you don't know how many times growing up, even as an adult, I stood in line at Pink's for a few hours for a chili cheese dog. Well, we took more than one chili cheese dog. And they've been in business for the longest, right? They've been in business for long before I was even born. That is the reputation they have, and they've expanded. They have locations all over the place. They even have them in Knott's Berry Farm. They have them at the airport. Like, they're all over the place. But it's still certain locations will have a long line. But that's the reputation that comes behind them. At some point, someone's going to say, well, I don't want to wait in line for Pink, so I will go to whatever other hot dog place. And that's what I prefer to do, and I don't have to do this, and maybe the wait over at this other place is only 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but I'm not waiting for a few hours. And so those are all the things that we have to take in consideration. Now, before I dive into our shout outs, I have a quote from Edward de Bono that says, companies that solely focus on competition will ultimately die. Those that focus on value creation will thrive. And the thing is that it's true, because sometimes you could be looking in someone else's yard. You could be looking at what someone else is doing. You could be so outraged and everything, and so hell-bent on competing, right? And looking at what you don't have compared to them, or in what way they undercut you or they outbid you or whatever, that you're not focusing on creating value for your customers. You're not creating value. You're not creating the ecosystem for a healthy work environment for your team members, for those employees. That company's going to die. It's going to be right there in that corporate graveyard. You can guarantee. So with that, let's talk about some shout outs. I'm shouting out 2 companies. I actually, indirectly, they don't know. I happened to find them. They were part of an MBE forum that was talking to companies that have, were securing or had secured their certification. And I just happened to see in the chat these 2 companies, and I said, I'm going to shout them out. And the first one is Tea's Tasty Treats and Catering. They do full service catering. They're in LA. They're in Culver City. I was born in Culver City. Tasty Treats is Tawana Wells, and they do private parties and weddings and corporate events. They have classes and drop-offs, and they do a ton of stuff. And I was looking at their sample menu that they have on their website. You can go to tstastytreats.com. So that's for T's. tstastytreats.com. And you can see a sample. They do continental breakfast, and they do dinners and dinner parties. They have brunch and tons of things. And their phone number, you have two phone numbers for them. One is area code 213-999-5086, 213-999-5086. And their other number is 310-990-7100. That's 310-990-7100. You can find them on Instagram at T's Tasty Treats Co. That's TS Tasty Treats Co. for company. And they are, for anyone that is looking for someone who is a minority supplier, they are part of the Southern California Minority Supplier Development Council. So if you're trying to make sure that you can get someone in on a bid, they are eligible in that capacity. So shout out to them. And then second is Postal Petals, owned by Talia Boone, and they're in West Hollywood. And what is really cool about Postal Petals is they connect flower lovers directly to farms to receive fresh flowers at competitive price point. So when you compare it to the retail marketplace, they ship farm direct boxes of fresh cut flowers to do it yourself to DIY flower arrangers. It's really cool. And they have built a community of over 20 domestic farms, and each box arrives with bundles of blooms, and you can break them apart and you can design them however you please, whatever, tickles your fancy. And what is really cool is they have what's called a Petal Riot, and it's their floral answer to paint and sip parties. So you can join a scheduled live riot, or you can host your private one at your home. And flowers are sold separately, but you can turn around, which I think is really, really cool. I love flowers, and so I wanted to. They said their purpose is to introduce a new way for people to enjoy the beauty of fresh flowers through the experience of arranging them. I think it's just the attention to detail, which is really, really cool. And if you go to their site, you can learn more about their founder, Talia Boone, and she's an LA native just like I am, and just a really great business concept. I think it's a really great way of connecting and building those communities and connecting people with their wants and needs. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Postal Petals. Their website is postalpetals.com. They are in West Hollywood. They amazing. I'm just wanting to make sure that I shouted out both of those companies. And I hope that, as I've said to you guys all the time, this information is in the description of the podcast, and we also share it in our blogs and our social media. So, you guys know what that is. It's that time. It's time to go our separate ways. But before we do, I want to make sure that you guys know to reach out to us with any questions or comments or suggestions at don'tcallitsmallbiz@gmail.com. And you can also go to foremanllc.com/podcast, and there's a feature there where you can be able to provide that information. There's a quote from Nancy Pearcey that I want to share, and it says that competition is always a good thing. It forces us to do our best. A monopoly renders people complacent and satisfied with mediocrity. With that, be sure to check us out on Facebook at Foreman and Associates and on Instagram and Twitter at Foreman LLC. Our podcast Twitter handle is It Ain't Small, and our Instagram is Don't Call It Small. Be sure to also follow us and share us with your friends, colleagues, and family. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Reach out to me, say hello, share your story. I look forward to meeting you. I want to make sure that I give proper credit for our show theme song. It's called Higher Up, and it's by Shane Ivers. Thank you for tuning in to the Don't Call It Small Business Podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. And don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you here next week. Make today a super awesome day. Take care.